Time to get on the horn here with Brett Dolan on the Lewis Automotive Hotline. Play-by-play, Touchdown Radio, Razorback Sports, Perfect Game, MLB. Brett, what's up? Happy Thursday.
Always good to talk to you, boys. We're bending towards November. Fun time in the old football calendar and beyond.
Yeah. Do with this information what you would like to do with it, Brett. Seeing a report from Riley McFerrin, who covers Arkansas at Hogbeat. This is the tweet. The Razorback Foundation jet just landed in Provo, Utah, the home of the BYU Cougars and head football coach Kalani Sitake. BYU has a bye this week. Do with that information what you will. Brett, do with that information what you will.
That is interesting. You know, every once in a while in these coaching searches, there's a curveball or a good Trey Savage slider, and I feel like that might be one that gets me swinging and missing on that one. Sitake's got a pretty good thing in the Big 12, if indeed that is the candidate. But every once in a while, don't these planes go to a neutral location to throw us off the trail just a bit?
Yeah, they do. That's why they like to have fun with the plane chasers. But
yes.
I don't know, bye week and everything seems like it makes sense.
I like the BYU coach, and one of the things Phil and I were talking about this, you know, when you have country boys, the people that – you have a lot of Samoans, you have a lot of Hawaiians that grow up in the ocean surfing. I mean, they're just from a earlier age, they're just stronger and more athletic when you're talking about the offensive and defensive lines.
And I would imagine they've got several. But I would say, Matt, I feel like he's in a pretty good spot at BYU because you're going to have a Big 12 representative in the playoff. You might have two. I would think the path towards winning that conference, sans Texas and OU and Oklahoma State is down and other teams aren't terribly good. I would feel like there's the possibility where you could win a lot of games in that league with your players and whatnot. But I understand there's a lure of the SEC, and there's some big dollars in the SEC, maybe some big buyouts too, because there's a lot of coaches that don't finish what they start. But I don't know. We'll be curious to see what shakes out, not just maybe in the next week, but beyond.
Yeah, I agree with you, and that's kind of why the Oklahoma State job, I don't know if you say, well, which job's better? They're probably pretty similar, Arkansas, Oklahoma State. I think it's an easier path to make it to the playoff 12 if you're at Oklahoma State than it is at Arkansas. Same kind of concept with BYU.
I think so, and the tough part, we're seeing it in this league right and left. It's hard to win 8 games, and 8 games isn't acceptable at times, or 9, or whatever it is, and the more money that's thrown into this sport, the more expectations, or the quicker people want turnarounds and changes and buyouts. It's a good time to be a college coach because you're going to make a lot of money, but it's certainly maybe the least stable we've ever had in this sport.
Hey, Brett, there's been a 2-year extension that Matt Rule signed through 2032, increased his buyout from $5 million to $15 million. We call this, coach's carousel at this time of the year and firing season and all of that. You know what it really is? It's extension season for the coaches who
he got one first at Indiana.
That's exactly right. Eventually, that's going to happen to one of the coaches who's a target in the SEC. And those who don't sign the contract extension, well, then we target them as the next coach for Florida or LSU, I guess.
I guess. I mean, it's curious because, when Penn State came open, Rule played there, but he's also good friends with the athletic director, and they work together at Temple, so that was an immediate thought. For Penn State, I don't know if Rule's been successful enough to be in your top tier, and for Rule, he's trying to build something in Nebraska. I don't know if I'm assuming he would jump because it's a better job, Penn State than Nebraska. But you get the extension one way or another. I'll tell you what, if Penn State really wanted it, but I don't think they do, $15 million is not prohibitive.
Hey, I'm kind of looking at this SEC slate, and we'll kind of get on some of these games here in a second. But I want to ask you about the Ole Miss South Carolina game. But for some reason, it always feels like Ole Miss is going to slip up. If it was last year at Kentucky, there's no doubt they're very talented. I think they're a playoff team. Are you a little nervous about South Carolina? They played Alabama tough. They got their quarterback back. How are you feeling about this South Carolina-Ole Miss matchup?
I tell you what, Matt, the entire month of November makes me nervous for kind of where you were going with that. I think there are games you look at, you feel like you have the answers to the test this deep in the year, and we do see teams that are playing better. And that Alabama felt like a trap last week for them. I give them credit for fighting through and finding a way to win, especially when they were down late. I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the Big Ten and SEC, where there's games that you just don't think one team's going to win, but just the circumstances or the grind. I think the schedule, though, for Ole Miss I would not surprise me in the least if they were 11-1 at the end of the regular season. Now, could they get tripped up? Absolutely. That fourth quarter Chambliss had against Georgia, where he was 1 for 10 for 1 yard passing, was that alone scares you a little bit, because it's possible that you just have a clunker of a game or a half that tilts something. But I think when you start looking at schedules, that has to be one of the most comforting schedules going forward for any team that's in the top 10 right now for Ole Miss. So they just need to find a way to avoid some of these upsets. But, no, I would be more than concerned with a handful of these games that are on the schedule in these next 2 or 3 weeks.
Elimination game for the Josh Heupel Bowl, Oklahoma at Tennessee. Both teams 6-2. Winner has a chance to go ahead and play in the playoff. 12. Loser is done. What's the key there, Oklahoma, Tennessee? Do you like the home team?
I would probably have to lean home team. And again, Tennessee wasn't that far away from beating Georgia. Maybe they should have defeated Georgia at home early in the year, and they'd be a little bit further along in this path. I don't think they're elite. I don't think Oklahoma's elite, but both of these teams are kind of in that next rung of teams outside the top 3 or top 4 in the SEC. Tennessee still has to be able to run the football a little bit better. It feels like they give up too many points, but it does feel like to me, while Oklahoma is better than they've been in years past, they're still maybe a year or two away from really being one of the top 3 or 4 teams, or at least competing to be in that run.
Brett, you and I both spent a lot of time in minor league baseball doing broadcasts. You've been up to the big leagues doing it too. And I've never felt, and it's obvious to watch it, because you get a guy like Trey Savage, who a year ago was, just kind of being drafted. And now he's Toronto's savior for the World Series, for crying out loud. Tony's been hired as the Giants manager. There were a lot of years I felt that there was a chasm between like Double-A and the major leagues, which meant that there was even a wider chasm between college baseball and the major leagues. That has really shrunk, and it's happened quickly. I'm not quite sure why it's happened, but it has happened, and I wonder your thoughts on that.
I think you have to give the college coaches some credit for the development. I agree with everything you've said as far as sometimes the different paths or the distance between being a good college player and a good minor league player and a good major league player. But you do see guys that have accelerated quickly. It makes me wonder if, for example, the White Sox were in contention. Could Hagen Smith come up and do something similar? I don't know. The Savage is interesting because, Phil, I went back and I looked at his minor league numbers, and I think he touched all 4 levels. I mean, his strikeout numbers were good, but I think he threw a little bit less than 100 innings and gave up more than 30 runs. So it wasn't as if he was, spinning 5 or 6 scoreless. But you watch him pitch last night, and you don't have to watch much to realize why he's successful with that slider and the splitter and the drop and the movement and the pitch shaping. And, you have to give East Carolina some credit for that, for not only developing but getting him ready. But, I mean, you can't help but wonder, are there other guys, if given a chance like that could do similar things? Because that was electric, even though he wasn't dominant at times this year in the minors. So I don't know if he's just found the perfect wave, but that's a damn good lineup he's cruising through, not just once but twice. And if the Blue Jays win the World Series, it's completely on his back for winning 2 of those games.
Well, I mean, it depends on who you're drafted by and how quickly they get good. Hagen absolutely could be a major league star given the opportunity. I think the same thing when I'm watching Gabe Gackle. If he's got his command, he's got big league stuff. It's just he's doing it in a smaller ballpark against college players. And if you get that stuff over, if you show command, they're going to get you up to the big leagues a lot quicker than before. Series over, or Yamamoto? Yamamoto's going to. It almost feels like an upset if he doesn't throw 9 innings.
Or pitch well, and I would love to see 7 games. I think that would be fantastic. Every time you assume something this year in the major leagues, you're wrong. I felt like once the Dodgers outlasted Toronto in Game 3, that would kind of tilt things in their favor with all the chips you push into the center of the table to win an 18-inning game. And then all of a sudden the Blue Jays come back without George Springer, one of their key components, and with a rookie pitcher, and they've sent this back to Toronto. So I'd really love to see 7 games. I don't know if I have a true dog in the fight, and Yamamoto's been as good as as your Savage has been. So maybe we will get 7 games out of this. It would be something. I think I saw Phil the other day that if the Blue Jays win the World Series, the Blue Jays and the Marlins would be 5-0 in winning World Series championships. And there's some teams that just would love to win one, but it's a wild sport we follow on a regular basis. That is for sure.
Want to ask you another football question, Brett. We were talking about coaches getting contract extensions. What do you think's going on in Austin right now? And I'm looking at Texas's schedule. They get Vanderbilt coming in, and it's an elimination game. Vanderbilt comes into their town, and if they win, Texas is done for the playoff 12. But if Texas wins, their hope's alive. Any truth, or are you feeling like Sark's going to still be the Texas head ball coach next year? And who do you like in this Vanderbilt-Texas matchup?
Well, I think where there's some smoke, there's some fire. He might have an interest in the NFL, and I don't know if these coaches just get a little bit antsy. I would say that the dollars that are rolling through Austin, I'd have a hard time leaving that. Even if I had some down years, I would feel like I have more resources to compete than others. This is intriguing in the sense that, Vanderbilt last week should not have won that game at home against Missouri. Missouri wrote a book on how to give it away, not scoring, getting your quarterback maimed, not kicking a field goal, they're kicking a field goal and missing it, and then throwing a Hail Mary and finishing 2 yards short. They clearly should have won that game. Offensively, Vandy did nothing. And Texas, if one thing, has a really good defense. Vandy likes to run. Texas can stop the run. I don't know if Texas can win this game or, kind of end the Pavia story for the time being. I will say this. If they win, I give them credit because they have not been nearly as good as last year, and yet they're still kind of finding ways to win. It would be fun to set up a Texas A&M matchup after Thanksgiving to see if Texas could cause some problems for the dream season of A&M. I might just lean Texas even without, their quarterback situation being unresolved, just because I was not impressed with Vanderbilt's offense last week against Mizzou.
You don't always win your first bet. That's why MyBookie has you covered. Use our code HOGS, HOGS, and your first bet up to $500 is fully covered. If your pick doesn't hit, you get it right back with our Bet Back bonus. Go to mybookie.ag and use the code HOGS to claim your Bet Back bonus. MyBookie's where bettors win together because bragging's good, but cashing in is better. And your first bet is fully covered. Use our code HOGS.
Must opt in during the bet to use the Bet Back bonus.